The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. This is David Reynolds. I'm your FMCC host for this broadcast, the third to last of World FM Day. And if not the most exciting, certainly going to be one of the most provocative and entertaining. So let's have at it. Enabling positive experience, you bet. Here we go. Bold questions for FM. We're live now from Canada and New Zealand, opposite ends of the earth. Meredith Thatcher comes to us from Canada and Ryan Peni from New Zealand. And we, just as an orientation, your host, FM Consultants Council, is listed among the gray, the councils. These are verticals in the IFMA Corona, and the blues are IFMA communities, horizontals. All of these are components surrounding IFMA Central. FMCC, a little orientation. Our vision is outward toward the rest of the FM community. We are the resource. We want to serve FMs. We're available everywhere, and our goal is the success of our clients, fellow FMs for the most part. And our mission, therefore, is inward, which is taking care of our own business, our own expertise, our learning, and so that we build a positive impact on the environment and the value to our clients. Oh, we're everywhere. Well, we're everywhere at IFMA anyway. We're in the FMJ e-edition every quarter. We're in Engage with a consultant directory, and we're on our own website with educational resources and locate a speaker. So don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We're consultants. We talk a lot, and we're ready to listen. Our sponsors for FMCC, ISS this year, and Opposite Security Consulting, the company of Art Crow, excuse me, full disclosure, who's also a FMCC member and active in the council. The group working on ISO 41000, among them Laverne Deckert, whose name appears at the bottom, asked us to put this piece in because it is big news. The bottom item, ISO 41001, is now released. It's been a long labor, and it basically is the key to the kingdom for aligning FM and the goals, objectives, culture, etc. of our parent companies, or in the case of consultants, our clients. This has been long in coming, and Laverne asked that we spread the word far and wide, and so we are. So, ready? I'm David Reynolds, I said, your moderator. We'll hold Q&A till the end of the presentation, but do type them in at any time that you'd like, or we can have a hand raising at the end and join in the conversation. And the PowerPoint and recorded webinar will be made available. So let's take a closer look at our two principals today, our two presenters. Meredith Thatcher basically deals with change in workplace, and has been doing so for quite a while. She's not lacking for long experience in IFMA, despite her young attitude and in energy. She's an IFMA fellow, CFM, FMP, and strategic thinker, but a very concrete, I would say, from our talks together, implementer. Inquisitive nature, yes, indeed, and it leads to good places. Ryan Peni, the New Zealand end of the axis here, basically entrepreneur who's put together now rapidly growing business called Niche Consulting, and he makes the claim is to passionate, and I'd say from our interactions that very much holds. Energetic, passionate, and we're ready to jump in and work on whatever we come up against. And today we'll try to survey some things we come up against. So it's all yours. Meredith, Ryan, have at it. I'll leave this one up as the placeholder sign, and let's begin with a little episode we had early in the preparation. I sent out. We said, well, we're going to bold questions for FM. was kind of the way Meredith suggested we go. And so I sent out a couple of things that were sort of academic in tone, and I got back a short little note that said, David, it didn't say it quite like that, but executives complain that FMs don't know how to speak to senior management. Communicating with senior management is confusing in an agile organization. FMers make broad statements about how hard things are. But what about solutions? Ryan immediately pointed out. So we can sort of take that as our departing helipad, if you will, and go from there.
Thank you, David. It's a real pleasure to be presenting today with Meredith. This is going to be a really exciting discussion, and you discussed some very good points that I'm very passionate about, and that's around clarity and articulation. And you mentioned just then about the facilities manager not necessarily understanding or having the ability to speak up. And the question that I'll start off with for the dialogue between Meredith and I is, how many active facilities managers don't understand their organisations, their core business, the strategy or purpose? How many of us come in and do our job, just do the FM, don't really understand the purpose, don't understand what the strategy is, haven't read the company vision and values? And I think it's exceptionally interesting conversation, one that I deal with on a daily basis with the organisations that I work with, which is, what is your core business? What are you actually doing? What are you doing here? And I think there's a real opportunity to be able to educate facilities managers. They already have the skills, they already have the technology and the technical know-how, but it's fusing that gap between a practitioner and what the executive team expect from a facilities manager.
Hi there, it's Meredith. And you know, Ryan, even though we're on opposite sides of the world, I think it is often the same situation no matter where you are, that the facility managers out there, they know their technical information down pat, and they have a tendency when they come to the executive is to speak in a very technical language as opposed to an executive language. And they are less likely to understand what keeps their executives awake at night and be able to answer those questions. That they are often coming with, please, can I have more money? Or look how I can save you money, not look how I can resolve your talent situation. Look how I can sort out your speed to market. Look how I can resolve your knowledge transfer issues. And there's a disconnect that occurs that they often sit there going, I don't understand why they don't understand what I need. I don't understand why they don't understand what I do. And I think the responsibility really lies on the shoulders of the facility manager to figure out how to speak in a business language and how to align facilities with the business strategy and understand what you're in the business of doing.
Absolutely. And I think you just highlighted a really good point there, which is how much money do I need? So we talk about capital, we talk about different kinds of capital that are important to facilities managers to be effective. And I know certainly from my career coming through over the last 15 years, it was all based around that financial capital. How much money can I get? What do I have to do to get that capital? But I think what facilities managers forget is that there are so many other different types of capital out there. There's financial capital, there's a network capital. Talk to your network, understand, what they're doing, discuss with them the issues that you're having. There's intellectual capital, there's physical capital, your plant building, maybe your workplace infrastructure. And then obviously the one that I really like is the motivation capital. It's okay to plan, prepare, strategize, and then obviously execute, but don't overcomplicate or plan to the detriment of actually getting things done. So we all talk about as facilities managers this wonderful, great thing about money and getting this money in, but there are other elements in there that need to be institutionalized into the thinking that present a really well thought up facility management plan that executives understand. And although a lot of organizations, and definitely the ones that I've worked with, are all based on the bottom line, I don't know what the bottom line is. I don't know what the strategy is unless I sit down and actually understand the core business and what the purpose is. I know what I have to do, but that may not necessarily be the outcome that the business wants.
That's a really good point. Just because I have a building that needs fixing doesn't mean that the business even wants that building going forward. But I find, I think one of the big disconnects I often see is that facility managers will prepare their capital budget, their annual budget, CapEx, OpEx, will prepare all that, but they forget that there's a business case requirement to go with it. And some of them get overwhelmed by the idea of a business case, but in my mind, there are three elements. How much money is it going to make? How much money is it going to save? And how are you going to improve what we do for a living? How do you improve the business? If you can answer those three questions, suddenly you're now aligning back into the business again. But there's often this assumption, well, they should know I need this. They're the executives, they should know. And I say to them, well, wait a second, but if I'm the executive and I'm going to give you millions of dollars, I kind of want to know that you know, and that you can show me that That's you know, right. If I'm going to give you that money.
Absolutely, and I think it's a really good exercise to go through with whatever organisation, group, investor you're working with. And I have to say that owning my own business and understanding the complexities that go into the decision making at this sort of level, you have a number of people coming through with various degrees of reporting, various degrees of wants, and it is so important to make sure that you get the point across as quick as possible. I used to read lots of reporting. As a facilities manager, I used to be one of those guys that wrote pages and pages of reports because I thought that's what was needed. And it wasn't until later in my career and before I founded Niche FM that no one was actually reading these. And in fact, they would skim through 3 or 4 pages and go, right, how much is it going to cost? What's the impact? Are we going to keep this asset over the next 5, 10, 15 years? Are we going to sell it? Or whatever requirement they needed for the business. And now that I'm in a different role and doing what I'm doing now, it's the same thing. If I get an email or a report that is more than 2 pages, I won't read it. There's just too much other things going on that are more important to the stability and future of the business, that reading a 5-page document about replacing a backflow preventer is just not my priority. And I ask this question all the time, Meredith, and that is, in an organisation, think of the shareholders, think of the board of directors, or think of mum and dad who own the business. If it was my money, what would I do? Would I pay for that? Would I buy it? Would I look at something else? And I think it is so absolutely important to actually, I'll go back a step because I think this is, when I was a child, and I'm sure a lot of people out there as well, we were curious. We had imaginations. We were out there exploring and inventing huts and that. And somewhere along the line, as I got older, that curiosity disappeared. And all of a sudden it became about facts and it became about reality. And what I've done over the last probably 10 years is had to retrain myself to be curious. Where has that gone? I was so curious as a child. And in fact, the more curious I got, or the more critical, the more confident, and the more I asked why, I believe I became a better facilities manager. It wasn't just about what was in front of me at that time, but it was asking why. Why are we doing this? What are we doing this for? What is the long-term strategic outcome that the organisation wants? And asking those questions and being confident to say, hey, Mr. CEO, why are we doing this? What is the driver? It's going to cost this. I understand that. This is a piece of plant, but what's the long-term objective? What's the long-term goal? What do you want to do? And when I started doing that probably in my 20s, the respect and the communication and the dialogue that I was able to draw back in was invaluable. I couldn't get anything more than that. And you can actually start building that confidence in your organization that, hey, you're actually thinking about not just the technical element of it, but you're actually talking about the business strategy, the business purpose of the overall plan moving forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've been, things running through my head, and it was interesting when you mentioned this thing about curiosity, because that's something I've always had. And actually I have people who drive with me saying it can be a little scary sometimes because they say, oh, what is that building? And they say, focus on the road. But curiosity is really important, and it's about asking the why. And I think sometimes people fall into a situation of they're being given a task, do this. And so they apply their facility solution to it, as opposed to stepping back and saying, first of all, what's the problem? And is it a facility solution? Maybe it's operational, maybe it's software, maybe there's I don't need to, build a new building or renovate through 3 floors or replace this piece of equipment. That may not be the problem. And, and yes, I can do that, but it's still not going to solve the original problem, because we didn't ask the why. What's going on? What's happening? What do I not understand? How come this doesn't make sense to me? And trusting our instincts. And I think you're right. I think sometimes we get too technical, too focused on get it done because I've got another, burning fire right in behind that. And understanding our audience. I had a case recently where we were presenting to an executive team and a board, and trying to explain to the team that we're presenting, an executive team ultimately has to toe the line. The CEO is finally going to decide what's going to happen, and the rest of the executives will align, or they'll be gone. The board, however, is like the Wild West. They can question, say, and do whatever they want. They don't have to toe the line, and that's why they're brought there, because they're brought there to poke holes. And recognize that how you prepare to deliver to an executive team is very different than how you prepare to deliver to a board. So just understanding the stakeholders, and they're all human beings. They all have different things they're interested in and different things that drive them. The one thing I learned, though, is don't make a mathematical error.
Yeah, for sure. And it comes down to what I was saying about network capital, is understanding the people that you're delivering to, understand the people that you're working with. I have a really strong opinion about this corporate environment where I work for this person. He is my boss. He is this. Well, let's break it down. Yes, he may be your line manager, but he is still in a role for the purpose of something. So break that layer down and actually think of it as a collaborative environment where we all work together. Just because you're a facilities manager or an accountant, there is no reason why there can't be a fuse between them to bring our solution together. And I know I talk about the different types of capital that are out there in terms of the financial, network, intellectual, etc. I think another one, and I think you touched base on it, Meredith, about the boards and the executive teams. And there's this other big, ugly word that sits out there, and it's called failure. And I, as a facilities manager working for some very, very big and successful companies, I loved it. It was one of the best periods of time that I ever had. But I was so scared of making a mistake, because the manager, or boss, but above me, was also so scared of making a mistake. And I think the minute you're able to break that mindset down and then incorporate the other types of capital that you have, you start making sound decisions. And I'm not saying to go out there and just make, various decisions based on no due diligence at all, but most things break, most ideas fail, but it's about how you recover. It's about having a plan B. It's about succeeding and taking that failure or that perhaps judgment and error and coming up with a credible solution moving forward. And that's all you can do. That's all you can ask for. And what I find, definitely working in some of the smaller groups that I have, they are so deadly afraid of making a mistake that they either don't do anything, or they're so reserved on the status quo that they don't think about a different solution. And that is going back to what I was saying about be critical, be curious, and ask why. Why are you doing this? Why is it broken? Why does it not operate? Why do we have them doing it opposed to someone else doing it? And it's so important to break those barriers down and have some fun, because otherwise, what's the point?
Yep. Well, and I think a lot of people their lack of moving forward comes from fear. As you said, they're afraid of making a mistake. They're afraid of being perceived as maybe a little out there. They're afraid of something not working properly. And the challenge with that is the more afraid you are, the less they will support you financially. Because they don't see you as being able to drive the organization forward, because that's really what they're looking for. When I wrote my first report for a client, And I worked for my mother. You want afraid? Try working for your mother. So I worked for my mother, and and I worked hard on this report, and I was very proud of it. And I delivered it to her, and I said, here you go. And the next day she called me in her office and she said, "That's lovely, dear. So what?" And I said, "What do you mean, so what?" And she said, "Well, it's just a whole lot of data and information. You haven't told them what's important. You haven't summarized anything. You haven't told them what they need to do. There's no there's no recommendations or clear. Now you need to do this." And I said, so I sort of licked my wounds and I left, and I went back and I thought, okay, that's totally valid, because I didn't actually tell them what to do. This is what I need you to do. And that's, I think, Ryan, where it comes into those lengthy reports. If we can learn how to very quickly get to the so what, answer the so what, what's important, what do we need to do, what are the next steps, what should we not be doing, you can synthesize that into a very short couple of pages so that they don't get bored and move on to the next pressing item.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a little bit of that goes into reinventing the wheel. We all universally know, regardless of the countries we live in, that it needs to be, I think, be bold, be brief, be gone, is what Meredith and David, you both say. And it's exactly right. It's, why do we continuously try and reinvent something that already works? I understand, I completely agree with re-innovate, re-energize, but the fundamental basis on how we report, how we do X, Y, Z, how we get up in the morning, put our shoes on and walk, it's the same. So if we think about it from a non-technical facilities management point of view, now bear in mind, I'm not a technical facilities manager. I fell into the role out of the army, and I had no intent. I was in facilities management for about a year and a half before I actually realised what it was. So I had a different perspective. I call myself an accidental FM, and I fell into an industry that I absolutely love, and it's brilliant. And then you have technical FMs, and I think there is such an awesome opportunity between those two different facilities management backgrounds that need to work together. And you have unbelievable practitioners out there. There is no doubt in my mind that some of these guys and girls are just absolutely insanely intelligent. It's great. And then you have a non-perhaps technical facilities manager who's really, really good at the strategy, the planning, the whatever it may be. And it goes back to that network and that intellectual capital around bringing it together, working together. And I know for the first maybe 3 or 4 years, I didn't want to ask for help, because I thought, being 19, 20, I knew it all until I didn't know it all. And then I went through the whole process, and it wasn't until I started bringing those relationships in where I learnt some really clear and direct reporting. And as you say with your report to your mother, I was the same. And I would submit these things, and they would go, right, great, I know about a fan call unit and the PSI rating for airflow, but what do I actually have to do? And I would sit back and go, good point.
Yep. So what?
So what?
Yep. Yeah, very much so. Very much so. But, you make a point of the incredible knowledge and skill of the facility managers around the world. And they spend a lot of time hiding that underneath, they're like mushrooms in the dark sometimes. They don't see, people just don't see what they know and what they do. When I tell people of the 11 competencies of facility managers, they just look, they go, really? And I tell them that, the size of budgets that they're managing, and they think, really? Because they don't know. And, so part of it is about waving that flag about, we do some pretty incredible stuff. We enable just incredible change in organizations. We, help our senior leadership team sleep at night. We, improve the opportunity to accelerate revenue. I mean, when you think of all of the contributions we make, but sometimes we get caught up in, have I saved the money today that they want me to save? But you're right, the skills are really quite astounding, and being able to merge all of that knowledge. I used to say to people, always hire someone smarter than you. Because they bring that additional knowledge and they challenge your thinking. Yesterday, we were lucky to listen to Paul Doherty, and he was talking about the virtual capital, and that in the future, the virtual version of our buildings will actually make more money than the bricks and mortars of our buildings.
Yeah.
It's rather.
I absolutely agree. I think it's getting out of that and going back to the initial discussion around society loves to do the failure dance, don't we? We do something. I don't like the word failure. I don't believe there is a type of failure. My type of failure is actually not giving something a go. But we like to do that dance. When something doesn't work, we're all there on the rooftop talking about it. Yet when something goes really well, you know what to be saying. You don't celebrate. And I think it's so important to celebrate those small successes. And, I, as a facilities manager coming through, I thought I knew everything. I thought I was the bee's knees. I thought I was it until I set my business up. And I thought, oh my God, I don't know anything. And you just nailed it. Employ people that are better than you. I have an unbelievable team of people with a variety of skills. And I've probably learned more in the last 3 years quickly by just having the really good people around me. And I wish if we could all think about that as early on in our career, or now, that it's people. And if you can get a really good network around you, because what I find about facilities management is it doesn't matter what company you work for. It doesn't matter if you're on a supply side and you work for the opposition. I've always found that facilities managers will take the time to help and discuss their issues and discuss the challenges and discuss what solutions they had, or that they bought a piece of kit from Italy rather than Germany, or whatever it may be. There's always a discussion to be had. And I have yet to come across a facilities manager in an opposition company who won't sit down and have a coffee and discuss solutions.
I think you hit on a really important piece about the culture of facility managers. And I'm the same as you. No matter where I am in the world, if I connect with a facility manager, they're proud to take me on a tour of their facility. They're proud to share. And it's more about helping each other up than trying to squash everybody else down. And I think that culture, I don't know that I've found another industry that does the same thing.
No. I mean, I separate to facilities management, I'm involved in a couple of other non-FM service-related businesses, and it's just absolutely ruthless. They don't have the time. They don't have the understanding that it's all about working together. But FM, I still come back to FM, and it's just incredible. And I think the really powerful thing at the moment is this drive and this passion for the industry. And New Zealand is incredible. I think we working in this environment here is just such a privilege to be able to offer. And over the years, I'm starting to see a lot more inclusion in terms of the other divisions within a group, the departments. I mean, procurement is starting to make a very heavy impact, but from a facilities management field as well. Then you have finance, HR, the whole lot. And I think it's so great. And we see it more and more with the clients that we work with about, it's usually help us with this. We need to understand our assets. We need to do some long-term planning, but ultimately we want to cut the silos down and bring the whole group under one umbrella, and that's fantastic.
Meredith and Ryan, suggestion. We're coming up on 30 minutes now. I'd kind of like to open it up for more general discussion by hand raising. How do you feel about that? You've covered a lot of scope, and we probably got some anxious questions out there, or at least some questions formulating.
Sure, let's go for it.
Yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
Those in attendance, what I'm going to do is, what I should be able to do, hold on, I'm working on it, is to have you raise your hand if you'd like to speak, or of course type something into the question chat, and I'll pass that on. I don't yet see. Joshua, how do I? Never mind, I see it. How do I see the list of attendees? Never mind, I've got it. As soon as I spoke your name, the truth emerged. So, people in the audience at this point, feel free to jump in. And Meredith and Ryan, go ahead and continue if you'd like. I don't have any hands raised yet, nor do I have any text typed in, but I'll raise a flag when I do.
Okay.
Great. And
all right. So,
Sure.
So Ryan, I have a question for you. What would be the three most, the top priority activities that you would recommend that a facility manager undertake if they're having to go in front of an executive team?
Good question.
The first one would be prepare. And when I mean by prepare is understand your audience, understand who you're delivering to, and getting that right from the get-go. There's no point in going in and presenting to an executive team who you just miss the whole point of it. So preparing, absolutely, it's incredible. Planning for not just the delivery, but planning in terms of what you have to deliver, understanding, going back to what I said about why, ask why, be critical, be curious about what you're doing. Most of all, it's coming up with a sound strategy that is going to sing through to the people that you're delivering to. You can do all the preparing, you can do all the planning that you can possibly physically do, but if you don't have a sound strategy and business case that goes along with that, then you are absolutely wasting your time, unless you have someone in that team who understands facilities management, who is able to then go away and convert it into an actual usable, manageable plan. But they have time constraints also. They have other things to do. So I would say prepare, plan, strategize. And the fourth one, which I know you only saw three, but the fourth is execute. Whatever you do, make sure you get that done.
Those are all excellent.
And how about you, Meredith? What in a change management environment where you're working with multiple areas of change, from people right through to infrastructure, what would your we had a discussion a wee while ago, and I said to you, change and relocation management makes my blood pressure go up because of the unknown and the worry. What would your recommendation or your points be to someone doing some really significant or small types of relocations and moves?
Well, you know, it's my career was mostly focused on workplace strategy, preparing the space for the people, and then I went off and got my change management credential so I could prepare the people for the space because of the massive workplace transformations that were happening. But there are a number of things that I've learned in the interim since I've been doing this change management, and I'm going to focus on sort of the executive side of change management. And the first thing is that number one, you have to have an executive sponsor. If you're going to implement anything, I don't care what it is, new software, workplace change, you know, whatever it is, new building, it doesn't matter. You have to have an executive sponsor. And it's amazing how many projects I've found that don't have an executive sponsor, and the amount of money that's being spent when no one has actually really endorsed it. So you have to have that sponsor, but they have to be active and visible, so they're not allowed to disappear. And I have most of them say to me, "Oh, thank God you're here, now I can back off." And I said, "Oh no, you don't get to back off. My job, however, is to coach you on how you can talk to your team, whoever the team is, whoever's being affected by this change, and to give you the words you need, because you have to be out front, you have to be active, you have to support, you have to walk the walk." The other big element is that I'm finding that we have to get that whole executive aligned, because if they're not aligned in the vision, you as the facility manager are going to be torn in 15 different directions. And you want them right up front stating what they think the vision is. Do they agree with where it is? You know, is the focus money? Is it function? Is it quality? Is it employee experience or client experience? Like, where are they going? What are all their thought process engaged in this? The other piece that I found with these executive teams in terms of change management is it has to be a world of no surprise for them. So that you have to, as the change manager or change leader, ensure that they are always apprised before anybody else, so that they themselves can get that comfort, because change has to cascade through an organization. It has to start at the top and work its way down. And so you have to always think of the order in which information is getting out to people. And if you can keep that executive team and then the next level of managers and the next level of managers informed, then and participating, then it really does help in getting that message through and driving the organization through change. Because in my mind, if you do a good job of change management, you can accelerate the return on investment, which we all want, and you can improve the likelihood of success of the project. But it's a very different way of behaving and talking, because you end up challenging often. And you have to say to them, well, I understand that you're uncomfortable with this, but let's talk about where it could go in the future and how this might affect you. And I have a whole presentation. It's all about sailing because I race, but I talk about there will be failures, so we have to be prepared to course correct. And there are also going to be times where not only are we course correcting, but we may flip the boat entirely and say, okay, this needs to stop and we need to try something different. So it's really about being very agile and responsive to what's going on, but recognize that the executive is the one that always has that final decision. Change is not about necessarily changing direction, change management. It's about helping people take that drive with you or that sail with you.
Excellent. I think you made a very good comment there as well about with the yacht flipping and understanding when it's time to stop and refocus or regroup. And that's something that I haven't touched base with, but that is exceptionally important to know when to stop and move into another direction. I've seen projects time and time again from new builds right through to existing facilities where we've seen people dig their heels in and just run with these solutions that don't work. Well, they're not solutions, these issues that don't work, and spend so much money on something, and it just so happens that it gets captured somewhere. They take a different direction, and it's solved in a matter of days, not months. So it's important to be able to recognise that it's okay to, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about this word failure, which is, I don't like the word failure. I think I mentioned that, but it's about recognising a point where okay, I need to stop this and regroup and re-understand, repurpose, and it's okay. It's okay to do that.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that it's now. I was very lucky. I grew up in a family where my father said, if you're not making any mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. So that there was pressure or encouragement to try harder, to push the boundaries a little bit, test things. And as facility managers, we learn to do things like pilot programs, because we want to test to see where the potential failures are. And I'd rather fail with 30 people involved than 3,000 people involved. And recognize that a failure is just an opportunity to improve.
A challenge is a solution waiting to happen.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Exactly.
That's really good. It really is. And it's like, I think the other thing that's really important is maybe popping your head outside of technical literature and actually exploring other areas. So one of the things I really enjoy doing is reading not so much strategy books. I'm not really particularly into the business strategy type books because they're a little bit boring for me, but I do like reading success stories, but also I like to see something that has a element of failure in it, because that's how I learn. And it's so important, I think, to get a bit more of a well-rounded view on things and go and understand the different facets of the business. I think it's very, very critical to understand. Generally facilities managers have been in it for a long time, already know their trade. They know it, they understand it, they know how a building ticks. Learn more, understand. I just think you can't learn enough. And not only do that, but take some people under your wing. I mean, I've got a mentoring program here in New Zealand with completely non-related facilities management people, and I learn more from them than they probably learn from me, because it's just an unbelievably different way of learning. And it's exceptionally exciting to see the different skills and the different perceptions that come into the fold. And I think that I wish I had done this earlier in my career, which is actually not always been around that facilities management fraternity, but understanding different viewpoints about how the world works.
And with that, we're grinding down toward the last couple of minutes we've got, and I think I'd kind of like to put a wrap on it. Any parting words aside from being alert for how we behave and how we affect others?
I have one. It doesn't matter what you do, it matters why you do it.
Bravo. Meredith,
oh, that's good. I like that one.
I'm not too sure where I read that from, but it's one of the very few quotes that stuck in my head.
I have a whole lot of quotes stick in my head. Somebody said to me, it's all about the soundbite sometimes. I would say for me, probably one of the most important things I've learned in my career is to ask that question, so what? Before I deliver anything, present anything, talk about anything, that I'm prepared with what's the so what here.
I'm holding on to both of those. Well, from there, thank you very much, both of you. It's an animated discussion, and enough in there for me as a still recovering engineer, mind you, it's been 18 years, to continue to watch myself and hold the technical part to the people in my vertical who are interested in that sort of thing. And when I go up to the C-suite, aside from getting my shoes shined, etc., talk business up there, talk it in a purposeful way. I'm comfortable both ways, but thanks a lot. Let's see where we're at. We are actually here where I've got the X marked, and we have 2 events left to go. The final is a wrap-up, which is tomorrow morning, my time here in Houston. But we do have an interesting follow-up here with Jessica Bickle and Graham Tier. Can too many properties run you over? Both these people manage dynamic portfolios, things that are coming and going rather quickly and quite valuable. And Graham will be the lead presenter, so that will roll out about 7, which is in a couple of hours and a little bit of change. So with that, we encourage you always to stay in touch with us at fmcc.ifma.org, and thanks for joining us. Good afternoon, good night, good morning, wherever you are. And I'll stay on a little bit. Let me, let's see, here we go. And I think that's goodbye. Let me stop the recording here, and I will do the transformation of the file, the record, and we're done. Again, thanks. Good night.